Welcome to the Salish Harvest Wild Ideas podcast. This place is a gathering for conversations from across the Salish Sea bioregion on wild food, wild medicine, and wild ways of being. I hope you enjoy our conversation for today. Welcome, Tilaï. Thank you so much for being with me here today on the Salish Harvest podcast and saying yes to sharing your story and your work with us today. I'm so inspired. Tilaï and I grew up as young friends together on Salt Spring Island, and yeah, it's been amazing just to see little windows of your journey online as you dive deep into nature photography and wildlife photography. And every time I see a post of yours, I'm just like blown away by how beautiful scenes and the creatures are that you capture, and also just so curious of what your process is like going out into the field. And it feels really special to be able to ask questions and hear a bit more about your journey. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Tilaï will also be one of our contributors to the Salish Harvest website with his beautiful photography, so you will get to see some of that soon. As I went into your website, I noticed a beautiful little quote right away that was something you had said of getting out into nature is one of the most influential activities I can gift to myself. No matter the plan or the method, so long as I am outdoors, I am happy. I was really touched by that, especially by the word gift. And I'm curious of when you first realized that this gift of time in wild places to yourself was one of the most important parts of your life.
Yeah, growing up on Salt Spring, I've always been a big nature lover. From being a toddler, running around my parents' yard looking for insects and mushrooms and whatever, to now as an adult, still looking for insects and mushrooms and backpacking, that kind of thing. So it's been a lifelong passion for me. Feel fortunate for that. And now as an adult, being in nursing, I feel like work-life balance is really important, and just getting out into nature is really beneficial and therapeutic, especially getting out with my fiance and my daughter. It's special, very special.
I'm curious of how that feels as a new father, bringing her into those wild spaces and just that journey of watching her exploration. And I'm
It's
curious.
really special. You almost sort of start to rediscover the world yourself, I find. You're stopping and looking at things for longer, and things you may not have looked at before, and you stop. It's like, oh yeah, that rock is really cool. That branch is neat. It's a lot of fun in that regard, rediscovery.
Yes, I love that. When did photography first start weaving into that experience for you? And I'm curious how that passion has evolved over time.
Sort of like my early teenage years, I really got into photography. My mom got me my first DSLR, and my dad got me a little action camera. So I was pretty hooked ever since. Passion's sort of always largely been nature, wild things driven. And it's sort of, I guess, slowly evolved now into where I'm able to use the images for conservation, to fundraise for wildlife, and to storytell and raise awareness.
Amazing. Yeah, let's dive into that. I'm very curious about this bridge of photography and its role of bringing environmental awareness and being able to advocate for conservancy. And
I've done a couple different projects. When I really first started getting into it, I was mostly donating prints into different fundraising or wildlife. So there was Pacific Wild hosted fundraiser, and Takaya did a wolf conservation fundraiser. I donated a couple images to, and kind of catapulted from there. I started getting involved with an organization coexisting with Carnivores Alliance, and they are involved in a few interesting projects themselves. And so I did some photography and video work for them. And yeah, it's a really unique and important way to get people to connect with things they may never be able to see.
I'm curious, inspirations that you've had in terms of photography and videography over the years. I love the photo behind you too.
Oh, thank you. That's one of my favorite photographers, Renan Ozturk.
Yeah,
He's a big one for sure. Done just some really, really powerful work photos that would leave me like, I don't even understand how he captured that or got himself to that location.
Hmm.
Couple other there's conservation photographers too. There's a couple, Paul Nicklin and Christina Mittermeier. They also just capture these images that just blow my mind. Like just don't understand. And they do some really, really important conservation work as well. So that's it's the combination of the powerful image and what they're doing with that image that, means a lot to me.
Mm. You were
So
speaking to like the storytelling aspect of it. And yeah, I guess sometimes when I think about the story, I'm just thinking about what's in the image. I just feel like a light bulb just went off of like, whoa, yeah, the journey to get there, the relationship with, like, for example, the grandmother behind you, and like all that's leading up to that moment being able to be captured. And I'm just curious when you express the role of storytelling in photography and just your own experience of that, what you mean by that.
yeah, and yeah, I think every photograph tells a story in its own regard. It's like what happened before, what was happening during, and what happened after that picture was taken. It's like when you look at some high quality photograph, it's like, wow, that's really cool. Someone went out there and got that. But you don't necessarily see the journey and the whole team and the weeks of planning and all the technical equipment and everything that goes into that image. So I think very powerful way to storytell and convey meaning.
Yeah, all of the before, during, after curiosities that linger behind the still. And I'm so curious about that process for you, of how long you're out in the field and what like a typical project looks like if you're scouting locations, and just, yeah, what that experience of like getting yourself out in front of these really elusive, beautiful creatures that most of us don't get to see unless we're spending a lot of times out in wild places.
It sort of starts right at the drawing board. If it's a new to me species and I don't know where to look or how to see them, I'm just start researching habitat, daily or nightly life cycles. Diet can give me an indication to where they might thrive as well. I like to try to identify behaviors as well, so I can read them better while I'm out in the field, because I try to
Mm.
be very ethical with my wildlife photography. And if I can identify that they're uncomfortable or getting scared, I like to just leave the situation. And from there, I just sort of start looking for places on Google Maps or from books that I've read or journals. Get out there looking for clues like
Mm.
markings or scat. Big part of it's just lots of time in the field is key, because the more you're out there, the more you'll see and the more beautiful moments you'll put yourself in the place to capture. Yeah, from there, if I'm fortunate enough to get something that I really like, and go back to the computer and tinker around with it. I'm not a big Photoshop guy. I try to keep things pretty natural, but I'll play with colors or I'll play with lighting and
Mm.
try to improve the image to a certain degree.
I appreciate that note on the ethics and just how mindful you are in your approach with that. And I'm curious what it is to be an ethical wildlife photographer and to do that in a really respectful way.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a big, important piece. I feel wildlife photography is becoming more popular than it has previously. Even 10, 20 years ago, you'd need to spend a lot of money on some crazy camera gear and it wasn't as accessible.
Mm.
But now these things are becoming more affordable. And back to the question, wildlife, especially with the climate changing and the human impacts the way they have been, things are becoming more challenging, more sparse for a lot of wildlife. So even something simple like scaring a bird away from its nest or a
Mm.
bear back up into the woods from the river while it's hunting, that can really impact them because they are, in a very challenging state, and every little bit of nutrients is important, and
Mm.
don't want to have them expending energy that's not necessary. So really, I try not to intrude in any way if I can. If I
Mm.
see that I'm scaring something or they're getting anxious, I just back away. It can be tough. Sometimes you see a moment that you want, but wildlife comes first. So
Beautiful.
another
Yeah.
another guide, Rain Coast Conservation Foundation posted, and it was a big list of ethical wildlife photography tips, and that's something I
Mm.
like to utilize. It's got some good information.
Nice. Rain Coast Photography.
Mm, yeah,
Awesome. That's a good resource.
yeah.
Nice. Amazing. I'm curious if you have any stories that come to mind of like really beautiful or impactful moments or experiences during one of your journeys that has stayed with you in a meaningful way.
Well, there's one major one that really sort of kickstarted this whole wildlife journey that
Mm.
really inspired me. And we were backpacking, sort of middle Vancouver Island in Nooka Sound. There was we were backpacking and it was very early in the morning and a wolf came down the beach and it was right during sunrise and the light was all golden and it sticks to me still to this day,
Hmm.
very vivid. And it came down and it wandered past our camp and stood there and waited. And then I believe that was the male. And then the female came and followed in his tracks. And it just was very powerful. And it was a moment that really stuck out to me and inspired me to get involved in trying to capture more and promote awareness and conservation issues regarding wolves.
What a beautiful scene. I
Yeah.
could just feel like the quietness and the magic of that sunrise gold light and these two magical beings just tiptoeing past. I'm curious to know more about the conservation efforts around wolves and why that's important. And if you feel to share a bit about that, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, of course.
Hmm.
Our coastal wolves are a little bit more protected here on the BC coast. There's a bit more of a challenge in interior BC with the government trying to protect southern mountain caribou, which is a at-risk species that are trying to be protected. But rather than stopping recreational activities or logging or mining in their protected habitat, they just choose to cull the wolves and the cougars.
Mm.
Um, that's a big thing that's happening in BC right now. It's a convoluted issue, as many conservation issues are. But yeah, it's sad. We've culled quite a few wolves, a few thousand, I understand now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm. And so, with the photography that you're doing, like there's fundraising efforts to buy and protect that land that's their habitat.
Yeah, one big organization that's involved is the same as I mentioned earlier. The Raincoast Conservation are working to
Mm.
buy all of the hunting tenures, I
Mm.
understand, in different portions of the Great Bear Rainforest. So that's a big move in protecting coastal carnivores, is buying up all the hunting licenses essentially.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
they just take people out on wildlife tours and fundraise to protect more that way.
amazing. Yeah, that's a good, important pivot because there used to
Absolutely.
be many, many more wolves roaming these lands than there are today. That's for sure.
True,
Yeah.
true. I
Hmm.
even read stories they used to be on Salt Spring.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah. For me, that brings up some deep sadness of just how much has been lost. Like, I've never seen a wolf in my life. And
yeah.
I grew up on these lands. And yeah, I'm curious of just your own experience of you put yourself in proximity in a really respectful way of being able to see these creatures that so many of us who live here have never had the opportunity to really come in contact with. And just your own experience of that grief and feeling into the damage that's been done.
It's definitely can be disheartening seeing all the damage humans have caused. Flying into certain locations, you can see just patchworks of big logging areas, messy mines, just destruction of the land. You know, a lot of my time spent on beaches too. It's a big area for wildlife, so I was collecting garbage as I go, trying to stuff it into whatever pocket is open in my already backpack. Being said, there's also hope. You know, many of these species I will see surviving in these harsh conditions and find hope in that. It's
Mm.
easy to go into like a dark hole if you're an environmentalist, but you got to keep the positivity rolling.
I feel that with your photography as well. It's like you capture the beauty and the magic of the wild so well. A feeling that, oh, wow, I'm inspired to go get out there because these reminders through your lens are so inspiring in that way. And you've been a photographer for how many years now? Like,
Jeez, dabbling for a decade or so, I'd say, maybe a
Amazing.
little bit longer.
Yeah, amazing. Do you believe that photography can inspire direct action and change, inspiring people to become more engaged directly in not just environmental initiatives, but also directly in connection to land?
Yeah. I think for a lot of folks, you're unable for whatever reason to go and experience the nature or the wildlife in the way that we're able to living in this coastal paradise here.
Mm,
As a conservation photographer, I feel it's kind of my duty to show these animals that people may never see and give them a reason to connect and care about them. If you can look into an animal's eyes, that really provides a depth and an understanding and a feeling of connection to some degree with that animal that they may never have without seeing that image.
mm. Yeah, appreciate that because when there's connection, then there's more desire to protect that which we're connected to. And if we never have these experiences or never even see what these creatures look like, then it becomes easier to forget about the responsibility of caretaking these places that are inhabited by many diverse species of plant and animal and insect and fish and so forth. Yeah, I'm always curious about that bridging because Salish Harvest, which was once started as digital forage, which was using technology as a bridge to inspire people to learn more about the local ecosystem and connect more to wild food and wild medicine in their area. But it's a funny dance, that dynamic tension between technology and nature connection. And a photo isn't the same as being in that direct experience of being in the wild. And so I'm always wrestling with that gap and that tension, and curious if there's anything there that you feel to share of your own journey of wrestling with that difference. And you also are living in these two very different kind of worlds of being in the Western medical system and then being out in the wilds of Vancouver Island. And I'm just curious of your own feeling of the divide there.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite part about it is definitely being out in the field, taking pictures, getting to be in nature. I enjoy editing the pictures, of course, and doing the post processing, but my favorite part is definitely being in the field. Keep the inspiration with the thought that it will inspire other folks to get out into nature themselves, or, even just pick up a book and start reading about the wild places that we have here and to become engaged in that regard. But it is a lifestyle that for, any number of reasons, I definitely have a privilege to be able to be in those places in the sense that I can afford it financially and I'm able bodied and healthy. And so um, that comes into my mind too, is folks who are unable to access these places.
Mm,
Now they can see these places, and that's special to me.
beautiful. Where my mind goes with speaking to the access piece and what is it to create those bridges where people can get to feel that a little bit more if they can't, for whatever reason, physically go out into those wild spaces. And I think of video and how powerful of a medium that can be as well. And I know you've started to lean into that. One of the projects I noticed on your website was the Souk Hills Regional Park Project and its focus between wildlife and climate change and recreational use of the parklands. And I'm curious to know more about the project and your experience of it and where that's going. And
Totally. That was a really fun project to be a part of,
mm,
actually. I kind of came in at the right time. It started by volunteering with the nonprofit Coexisting with Carnivores Alliance. And at the time, that project in Souk Hills was just getting started with the trail camera placement portion of the project. And they wanted to have a video put together to explain to the public about what was going on. I think a lot of us would rather not be on camera while we're out for our nice hike, myself included. But they placed a number of cameras throughout the park, and they take all that data that they collect and they run it through some software, and it reviews all the data and it removes any sort of identifying features from people so researchers can review the data, so nobody needs to be concerned for their privacy in that
nice.
regard. And that project will provide some really interesting data on what kind of species use the park and where and at what times. It'll identify wildlife corridors to inform CRD about potential for future trail building within the park. And it'll provide data as well on like human wildlife interactions. So it's going to collect a lot of really interesting information. I look forward to seeing where that goes.
Very exciting. I'm curious, do you have a time frame of when there'll be like a first review of the data that's been gathered?
Pretty much a month or two after I started, they had already over, I think, 30,000 pictures on the first trail camera.
Wow.
The professor, Chris Bone, who I was working with, I think I remember him saying projects maybe got a time span of 10 years. Yeah, so it's pretty extensive monitoring. Yeah, really interesting. They've already got some really cool stuff there.
Wow, that's so special. Just been really actually loving. I have a few different trail cam people on my Instagram, and just to be able to watch a live sped up feed of all the creatures that are in these spaces that when we walk through, they're all kind of in hiding or rest, and we don't get to notice as much. And so to see who we're walking alongside and interweaving with, I really appreciate the efforts there, because I imagine like that data with regard to trail building or public recreational use, there's this emphasis on trying to have the least disturbance of wildlife corridors and their natural flow in the park as well. Yeah.
It's a really interesting avenue of photography I've been wanting to dabble into, because it's very much, I would say, the most ethical kind of way you can capture the wildlife, because you put your camera up and then you're gone, and they can be natural and you get to see their natural behaviors, and see some really cool stuff, trail cameras.
Yeah, on that note, I'm curious where you want to go with this, and what are some big inspirations for you right now? What are some visions or dreams or curiosities that are pulling you forward?
That's a good question. I feel really happy with the direction that my work has been going, with helping to raise awareness, volunteering with nonprofits, getting to storytell and provide awareness around wildlife. I think that's been all really exciting for me. It's kind of what I've been working towards getting my photography to. So that's really exciting. I think just more of that, really, more helping nonprofits, more conservation work, and just more time out in the wild. That's my favorite. I think it's important and helpful and therapeutic for anyone just to go for a walk in your local park. You don't have to start going on some crazy expedition. Just outdoors, see the green, the moss, the ferns, trees. And that can just be inspiring in itself and provide some benefit.
Good reminder, definitely. Yes. Just to do it, just to move.
Yeah.
Make that leap into outside, off the computer, off the phone.
100%.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
easy, like the way it is these days. So busy, always something else to do. But it's good to take some you time and just go relax.
Yes. Thank you so much for your time and your shares and your stories, coming on here and sharing with us all.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's conversation on the Salish Harvest Wild Ideas podcast. My name is Sophia, and I am honored to be your host, and I am very grateful to all the guests who come on here to share their stories and their wisdom with us. This project is based on the traditional unceded and asserted territories of the Coast Salish people. We honor the Lekwungen, the Cowichan, and the Wasanic nations, and we pay our respects to the elders and stewards of these lands, both past and present. We hope you will join us for another conversation soon.